The rain fell gently against the window pane that spring afternoon in 2007, each droplet racing down the glass like tears on a cheek. 15 years had passed since that day, but Diane Marshall could still recall the sound with perfect clarity. The same rain now tapped against her kitchen window as she sat at the table, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold, staring at the faded photograph of her daughter, Bethany. Bethany Marshall was 16 when she disappeared without a trace, a bright, ambitious girl with honey blonde hair and a smile that could light up a room. She had dreams of becoming a journalist, of telling stories that mattered. Her bedroom remained untouched on the second floor of the suburban Houston home, frozen in time like a museum exhibit of adolescent life in the early 2000s. Posters of bands that had long since broken up still clung to the wall. A collection of notebooks filled with her thoughts and aspirations gathered dust on the desk. 15 years, Diane whispered to herself, running her finger along the edge of the photograph. 15 years today. The case had gone cold quickly. In the beginning, there were searches, news reports, and community outreach. Bethany's face was plastered across the city, her smile beaming from missing person posters that gradually weathered and tore away. The detective assigned to the case, Robert Calloway, had promised to never give up, but as weeks turned to months and months to years, even his calls became less frequent. "Where are you watching from today?" Diane asked the photograph, a ritual she performed every year on this grim anniversary. "Are you somewhere beautiful? Are you safe? Are you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Some possibilities were still too painful to voice, even after all this time. The doorbell rang, pulling Diane from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. Few people remembered what this day meant to her anymore, and those who did usually sent a text rather than stopping by. The world had moved on, even if she couldn't. When she opened the door, Detective Calloway stood on her porch, older now, with streaks of grey in his hair and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 15 years ago. But what struck Diane most was his expression, a strange mixture of tension and something else, something that looked almost like hope. "Mrs. Marshall," he said, his voice low and careful, "may I come in? There's been a development in Bethany's case." Those words she had both longed for and dreaded for 15 years, made her knees weak. She stepped aside wordlessly, leading him to the kitchen where her cold tea and Bethany's photograph waited. "What kind of development?" she asked once they were seated. Her hands trembled as she pushed the mug aside. "2 days ago, a woman came into the station asking to speak with someone about a cold case from 2007, Calloway explained, his notebook open in front of him. "She was nervous, kept looking over her shoulder, said she'd been carrying a secret for too long." Diane's heart pounded in her chest. "What secret? What did she say about Bethany?" "She didn't know Bethany personally," Calloway continued, "but she knew someone who did, her ex-husband, a man named Victor Lawrence." The name meant nothing to Diane. "Who is he? What does he have to do with my daughter?" In 2007, Lawrence was working as a guidance counselor at Westfield High School. Diane shook her head. "Bethany went to Eastlake, not Westfield." "I know," Calloway nodded. "But according to his ex-wife, Lawrence ran a weekend writing workshop for talented students from several schools in the district. Bethany attended those workshops for about 6 months before she disappeared. Something cold settled in Diane's stomach. "I don't remember any workshop." According to Mrs. Lawrence, her ex-husband kept careful records of his special students. She found a box in their attic when they were divorcing, journals, photographs, personal items. Bethany's name was in his records. And she's just coming forward now. 15 years later, Diane's voice rose with indignation. She claims she only found the box recently when selling their old house after the divorce. And what she found— Calloway paused, choosing his words carefully. "It was disturbing enough that she came to us immediately." "What did she find?" Diane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Calloway pulled a clear evidence bag from his pocket and placed it on the table. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small star charm. The same bracelet Bethany had received for her 16th birthday, just 2 months before she vanished. She was wearing this the day she disappeared, Diane said, her fingers hovering over the bag, afraid to touch it, as if it might dissolve into nothing. How did this man have it? That's what we intend to find out, Calloway said. We've obtained a warrant to search Lawrence's current residence and the old house, but there's something else, Mrs. Marshall, something that might be difficult to hear. Diane steeled herself, gripping the edge of the table. Tell me. Mrs. Lawrence believes her ex-husband may have been inappropriately involved with several of his students. She found letters, photographs, nothing explicit enough to act on until now, but enough to establish a pattern. Are you saying that Bethany... Diane couldn't finish the thought. I'm saying we finally have a lead, Calloway replied, and I'm asking for your help. We need to know everything you can remember about that spring. Did Bethany ever mention this workshop? Did her behavior change? Were there calls from numbers you didn't recognize? Anything at all could help us now. Diane closed her eyes, trying to piece together memories from 15 years ago. There had been something, a change in Bethany in those final weeks. A secretiveness that wasn't like her, late-night calls that she took in whispers. She was different, Diane said slowly, more withdrawn. I thought it was just normal teenage mood swings, but now I wonder. The rain outside had stopped, and a shaft of afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the dust motes in the kitchen air and casting a glow on Bethany's photograph. For the first time in 15 years, Diane felt something stir within her, something that felt dangerously like hope. Whatever happened to my daughter, she said, looking directly at Calloway, I want to know, even if the truth hurts. I need to know. 3 days after Detective Calloway's visit, Diane found herself standing in a storage unit she hadn't opened in a decade. The musty smell of forgotten things greeted her as she pulled the metal door upward with a rattling screech. Inside were the carefully packed remnants of a life interrupted. Boxes labeled in her neat handwriting, Bethany's school papers, Bethany's awards, Bethany's clothes. Calloway had asked her to look for anything related to the writing workshop, a flyer, a permission slip, notes, anything that might connect Bethany to Victor Lawrence. Diane had scoured the house already, finding nothing. This storage unit was her last hope. She pulled out a box marked Bethany's School, 2006-2007, and settled on a small folding chair she'd brought with her. As she opened the cardboard flaps, the scent of her daughter's perfume, still lingering after all these years, brought tears to her eyes. Inside were report cards, school newsletters, and a planner with Bethany's looping handwriting. Diane flipped through the planner slowly, scanning each page. January, February, March 2007. And there it was, penciled in on alternating Saturdays. Writing workshop 1:04 p.m. Nothing more, no location, no teacher's name. Just those 2 words repeated through April and into May, stopping abruptly on May 12th, 1 week before Bethany vanished. Her phone rang, startling her in the quiet storage unit. Mrs. Marshall, it's Calloway. We've just executed the search warrant on Lawrence's property. I think you should come down to the station. An hour later, Diane sat across from Calloway in a small conference room at the Houston Police Department. Between them on the table lay several evidence bags containing items found at Lawrence's home. A flash drive, a small leather-bound journal with Bethany's name embossed on the cover, and a stack of photographs. We haven't processed everything yet, Calloway explained, his voice grave. But what we've found so far confirms our suspicions. Lawrence had a pattern. He targeted talented young writers, mostly girls, from different schools. He'd invite them to his private workshops, gain their trust, and then... "Did he hurt my daughter?" Diane asked, her voice barely steady. Calloway hesitated. "We don't know exactly what happened to Bethany yet, but we've found something important." He pushed forward a printout of an email. This was recovered from Lawrence's old computer. It was sent to Bethany the day before she disappeared. Diane read the email with growing horror. "Bethany, I can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You're right. We need to be careful. People wouldn't understand what we have. The connection between us is special, rare. I've made arrangements for us to meet somewhere private tomorrow after school. I'll pick you up at the corner of Westheimer and Dairy Ashford at 4:30. Don't tell anyone. This is just between us. V. Did he... Diane couldn't finish the sentence. We don't know yet, Calloway said gently, but this gives us a time and location to start with. We're pulling traffic camera footage from that area, checking credit card statements from that day. Lawrence claims he hasn't seen Bethany since the last workshop, but his story is full of inconsistencies. You've spoken to him? Diane asked, anger flaring. We brought him in for questioning yesterday. He's been under surveillance since his ex-wife came forward. Calloway pushed a button on a remote, and a monitor on the wall flickered to life, showing a man in his 50s sitting at an interrogation table. Victor Lawrence had thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a nervous habit of adjusting his collar. He looked ordinary, harmless, the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Did your daughter ever mention him? Calloway asked. Diane stared at the screen, searching her memory. There was a teacher she talked about sometimes. She never used a name, just called him my mentor. She said he told her she had real talent, that she could be published someday. Calloway nodded. Lawrence used that line with all of them. We've identified 7 other girls who attended his workshops between 2005 and 2012. Have you spoken to them? 5 of them. 2 have moved away, and we're trying to locate them. The others confirmed inappropriate behavior, special attention, private meetings, gifts. But none reported anything beyond that. Calloway paused. Except for one. He pulled out another file. Jessica Ramirez attended the workshops in 2009, 2 years after Bethany disappeared. According to her statement, Lawrence became increasingly possessive, telling her they had a special connection. When she tried to leave the workshop, he followed her, showed up at her school, sent dozens of messages. Her parents filed a restraining order, but the school district handled it quietly. Lawrence was asked to resign, but there was no criminal investigation. They let him go, just like that. Diane's voice rose in disbelief. It was a different time, Calloway said, though his expression showed he didn't consider it an excuse. The school wanted to avoid scandal. Lawrence moved to another district in Dallas, then to a private school in New Mexico. He returned to Houston about 5 years ago after his divorce. Diane looked again at the man on the screen. What is he saying about Bethany? He admits knowing her, says she was talented but troubled, claims she confided in him about wanting to run away, but he discouraged it and never saw her after their last workshop. That's a lie, Diane said firmly. Bethany wasn't troubled. She was happy. She had plans for college, for her future. Calloway nodded. We believe you, and we think we can prove he's lying. He pulled out one more evidence bag, containing a small flash drive. Our tech team found this hidden in a false bottom of Lawrence's desk drawer. It contains journal entries, saved as text files, dated between 2005 and 2018. He handed Diane a printout of one entry, dated May 17, 2007, the day Bethany disappeared. I had to act quickly. She was becoming erratic, threatening to tell her mother about us. I couldn't let that happen. Not now, not after everything. She didn't understand the consequences. What we had was special, but fragile. The world wouldn't have understood. I explained this to her today when I picked her up, but she wouldn't listen. She said what I was doing was wrong, that I needed help. She doesn't understand. Nobody does. I've made arrangements. She'll have time to think now, to understand. When she's ready to accept things, we can try again. Diane's hands shook as she set down the paper. What does he mean? Made arrangements. Where did he take her? That's what we need to find out, Calloway said. We're bringing in specialized search teams tomorrow to go through properties Lawrence owned or had access to in 2007. We've also got a team investigating a cabin registered to his brother in the Sam Houston National Forest. Lawrence used it regularly, according to his ex-wife. Diane looked down at the evidence scattered across the table. Pieces of her daughter's life, clues to a mystery that had consumed her for 15 years. Do you think she could still be? She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. Calloway's expression was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Marshall, I don't want to give you false hope. 15 years is a long time. But we're going to follow every lead, turn over every stone. We won't stop until we know what happened to Bethany." As Diane left the police station that evening, the Houston skyline was bathed in the orange glow of sunset. She thought of all the sunsets Bethany had missed in 15 years, all the moments that had passed without her. For the first time since her daughter vanished, Diane felt something beyond grief, a burning determination to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In her purse, she carried a copy of the email Lawrence had sent to Bethany. The intersection he'd mentioned, Westheimer and Dairy Ashford, was less than a mile from her home. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go there. She would stand on that corner and try to imagine what Bethany had felt that day, waiting for a man who had pretended to care about her dreams while harboring something dark and destructive. Maybe, just maybe, in retracing those final steps, she might find a path to the truth. The forest was quiet, except for the sounds of search teams moving methodically through the underbrush. 1 week had passed since Lawrence's arrest, and the investigation had led them here, to a remote area of the Sam Houston National Forest, where Lawrence's brother owned a hunting cabin. Dogs trained to detect human remains worked alongside officers with ground-penetrating radar, searching the property inch by inch. Diane stood at the edge of the search area, wrapped in a jacket despite the mild June weather. She hadn't been able to stay away, though Calloway had gently suggested she wait at home. Something pulled her to this place, perhaps the same maternal instinct that had kept her searching for answers for 15 years. "Mrs. Marshall?" A young officer approached her, offering a cup of coffee from a thermos. "Detective Calloway asked me to check on you." She accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Any news?" "Nothing yet, ma'am, but they're being thorough." As she sipped the coffee, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Marshall, this is Andrea Lawrence." Diane stiffened at the name. "Victor Lawrence's ex-wife." "Yes," the woman's voice was hesitant. I wanted to speak with you. In person, if possible. There are things I didn't tell the police. Things I should have said years ago." An hour later, they sat across from each other at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Houston. Andrea Lawrence was a thin woman with anxious hands that continuously adjusted her scarf, her coffee cup, her napkin. Her eyes darted around the cafe, as if expecting her ex-husband to appear at any moment, despite his being in custody. "I should have come forward sooner," Andrea began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I was afraid. Victor has a way of making threats seem like promises, making you doubt yourself." "What do you know about my daughter?" Diane asked directly, having no patience for the woman's self-recrimination. Andrea pulled a small photograph from her purse and slid it across the table. It showed a cabin in a clearing, surrounded by pine trees. A wooden shed stood about 50 yards behind it. "This was taken in the summer of 2007, a few months after your daughter disappeared. We were at the cabin for a weekend. Victor spent most of the time in that shed. He said he was working on a writing project, but he kept it locked, always locked." "Did you ever see inside?" Diane asked, studying the photograph. "Once, in 2008. Andrea's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "Victor had been drinking. He passed out on the couch. I found his keys, and I was curious, suspicious. He'd been different since that spring. More secretive, more controlling." "What did you find?" The shed had been converted into a small room. There was a cot, some books, a radio, a sink and portable toilet. It was like a prison cell, but Andrea hesitated. It was clean, looked after. There were women's clothes folded on a shelf. And this. She pulled out another photograph. This one showed a wall above the cot. Pinned to it were pages torn from magazines, articles about missing persons cases, police investigations, search efforts. In the center was a newspaper clipping with Bethany's school photo and the headline, "Search Continues for Missing Houston Teen." Diane felt her breath catch. "Was she there? Did you see her?" Andrea shook her head. "No, the shed was empty, but there was evidence someone had been living there recently. a hairbrush with blonde hairs, a notebook with writing that wasn't Victor's. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small, worn journal. "I took this. I've kept it all these years. I should have given it to the police, but I was scared. If Victor found out..." Diane took the journal with trembling hands. The first page contained a single line in handwriting she recognized immediately as her daughter's. "Day 1 of captivity. He says he's protecting me from myself, that no one would understand our connection. He's wrong, he's sick. I need to find a way out." Tears blurred Diane's vision as she flipped through the pages. The entries continued for months, detailing Bethany's efforts to reason with Lawrence, her attempts to escape, her growing despair, and then, unexpectedly, her determination. The final entry was dated December 18th, 2007, 7 months after her disappearance. "He's getting careless, leaves the key in his pocket when he sleeps on the chair, says I'm accepting my situation, that I'm learning to appreciate what he's done for me. He's wrong. Next time he comes, I'll be ready. I'll get out or die trying. If anyone finds this, tell my mom I love her. Tell her I never stopped trying to come home." Diane looked up at Andrea, tears streaming down her face. "What happened to her?" "I don't know for certain," Andrea admitted. "But a few days after I found that journal, Victor came home with a bandaged hand. Said he'd had an accident at the cabin. He was agitated, kept changing the subject when I asked questions. A week later, he insisted we sell the cabin. Said he'd had a better offer from a developer. We never went back." Diane's phone rang again. Calloway this time. Her hands shook so badly she could barely answer. "Mrs. Marshall, we've found something. Can you come to the north side of the property, near the old shed foundation?" 20 minutes later, Diane stood beside Calloway as forensic technicians carefully excavated an area behind where the shed had once stood. It had been torn down years ago, according to property records, but ground-penetrating radar had detected an anomaly beneath the soil. "What have you found?" she asked, her voice strained. Calloway's face was grim. "Human remains. We can't confirm identity yet, but it's her, isn't it?" Diane said, not really a question. "We'll need dental records, DNA confirmation. But yes, preliminary evidence suggests these may be Bethany's remains." Diane closed her eyes, a strange calm settling over her. After 15 years of uncertainty, of desperate hope mixed with unimaginable dread, she finally knew. Her daughter had never stopped fighting, had never given up, had tried to come home. "There's something else," Calloway said, leading her away from the excavation to a nearby evidence tent. Inside, technicians were carefully examining items found near the burial site. On a table lay several evidence bags. One contained a small silver star charm, broken off from the bracelet Lawrence had kept. Another held a rusted key, but it was the third item that caught Diane's attention. A small piece of metal, shaped like a blade, crudely fashioned from what appeared to be a piece of tin can. "We believe Bethany managed to create a weapon," Calloway explained. "The medical examiner will confirm, but initial observations suggest Lawrence didn't bury her without a struggle. There's evidence she inflicted a significant wound, possibly to his hand or arm, before she was overcome." "She fought back," Diane whispered, a mixture of pride and immeasurable sorrow washing over her. "Yes, she did," Calloway confirmed. "And she left evidence that helped us find her. The key we found, it matches a brand used on storage sheds like the one that used to stand here. We believe she managed to take it from Lawrence during their struggle. If she hadn't, he didn't need to finish the thought. Without that key as evidence, they might never have focused their search on this specific area." 3 days later, the DNA results confirmed what Diane already knew in her heart. The remains were Bethany's. That same day, Victor Lawrence was formally charged with kidnapping and murder. His ex-wife's testimony, the journal, and the physical evidence formed an overwhelming case. The district attorney informed Diane they would seek the maximum penalty. The news spread quickly through Houston. Other families whose daughters had attended Lawrence's workshops came forward. None had disappeared like Bethany, but many shared stories of inappropriate behavior, of boundaries crossed, of a system that had failed to protect them. The school district launched an internal investigation into how Lawrence had been allowed to continue teaching after the first complaints. 1 month after the discovery, Diane stood in Bethany's bedroom, finally ready to do what she couldn't for 15 years, to pack away her daughter's things, not in desperate preservation of a frozen moment, but in loving memory of a life that, though short, had been filled with determination and courage. As she carefully folded Bethany's favorite sweater, there was a knock at the front door. When she opened it, she found Jessica Ramirez, now a woman in her early 30s, standing on her porch with a bouquet of sunflowers. "Mrs. Marshall," she said hesitantly, "I don't know if you remember me. I was one of the girls from Lawrence's workshop. I wanted to pay my respects." Diane invited her in, and they sat in the living room where photographs of Bethany through the years lined the walls. "I've started a support group," Jessica explained, "for all of us who crossed paths with him. When I heard about Bethany, what she did, how she fought," Jessica's voice broke. "She saved others, you know. After what happened to her, he never took anyone else to that cabin, and the evidence she left behind finally brought him to justice. She wanted to be a journalist," Diane said softly, "to tell important stories. In the end, she told her own." The following Sunday, more than 100 people gathered at a memorial service for Bethany. Former classmates, now in their 30s with families of their own, teachers who remembered her bright mind and determined spirit, Detective Calloway and his team, Jessica and the other women from the support group, and at the center of it all, Diane. No longer the woman frozen in grief she had been for 15 years, but a mother standing tall, finally able to lay her daughter to rest. After the service, Calloway approached her with a small evidence bag. "The case is closed now," he said. "We've kept this for you." Inside was Bethany's silver bracelet with its single star charm, now reunited with the broken piece found at the cabin. Diane took it, feeling its weight in her palm. A tangible connection to her daughter, to the girl who had never stopped fighting, never stopped trying to come home. That evening she sat alone on her porch, watching the sun set over suburban Houston. She fastened the repaired bracelet around her own wrist, the silver star catching the last light of day. "I found you," she whispered to the fading light, "and you found your way back to me. If you were moved by Bethany's story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. A new video has just appeared on your screen that explores another powerful story of truth and justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May we never forget those who fight against impossible odds, and may their stories continue to shed light in dark places.